May Allah make it easy for you.
Ameen.
Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma inna nasta'inuka wa nastaghfiruka wa nu'minu bika wa natawakkalu alayka wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa may yudlil fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Alhamdulillah, assalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We continue with this topic, lessons from Muslim history. And in talking about lessons from Muslim history, we are now at a point of the Abbasid dynasty, where we are talking about the so-called Islamic golden age of sciences. And today would be the 5th session on the Islamic golden age of sciences, of humanities, sciences, technology, engineering, medicine, etc. And today's session would be the 4th session on contributions in these different fields. We thank Allah for giving us the tawfiq to gather together. Today we have a special dua. So I will cut it short compared to the usual time in other days. In the very first session in this series, we talked about introduction and basically causative factors, what caused the Islamic golden age. And then we started talking about contributions in various fields, and I have been revising this number from 3 to 4 to 5 to now 6 sessions we will need. Today is the 4th session, so another 2 sessions we should be done with contributions in various fields. And then we want to talk about, or actually mention, some of the inventions of Islamic golden age. There are at least over 1,000 inventions worth mentioning. And as I mentioned, in London, there was an exhibition on 1,001 inventions of Islamic golden age. And hopefully I will mention some of them in one session. And then I will talk about intellectual giants in one session. We had mentioning the intellectual giants here and there, but in this last session, I will talk about the intellectual giants as a sort of brief, very brief biography on each one of them, very brief. And so this is part of series on lessons from Muslim history from the lens of reward and punishment. Based on Quran and Sunnah, my goal is to analyze why Muslims flourished when they flourished, and why they decayed when they decayed. In other words, why were they rewarded when they were rewarded, and why were they punished when they were punished? What do we get from Quran and Sunnah in terms of reward and punishment? That's the overall goal of going over Muslim history. Now, this introduction is made brief from previous introductions. It's basically the same topic, contributions. So in introduction, I wanted to keep it the same way for those who are joining for the first time. The Islamic Golden Age was a period of scientific, economic, and cultural flourishing in the history of Islam, from the 8th century to the 13th century, and some extend the date a couple of centuries beyond. From the reign of Harun al-Rashid, after the inauguration of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, scholars from all over the Muslim world flocked to Baghdad, and there were also centers in other major cities within Muslim dynasties that were formed with the splintering of the Abbasid Empire. So there was work of scholars, notable work that were done in other cities. And Baghdad happened to be the world's largest city by then. To translate the known world's classical knowledge into Arabic and Persian, the period is traditionally said to have ended with the collapse of the Abbasid dynasty due to the Mughal invasions and the siege and massacre and annihilation of Baghdad in 1258 by the Mongols. Muslims and others preserved earlier traditions and added innumerable inventions and innovations of their own. So this last sentence summarizes Muslim contribution in one sentence. Contributions in various fields. Today is the 4th session. Highlights of the first session, we talked about contributions in various fields in terms of arts and culture and agriculture and market economy, industrial growth, contribution to labor and urbanization, and finally conclusion. In the second session on contributions, we talked about architecture basically. That took quite a bit of time. It's tremendous contribution of Muslims in architecture. And this was mostly visual. And then I talked about contribution in terms of music under arts and culture. But then I found from some other source some very interesting contributions of Muslims. So that I added here. In conclusion, in the third session on contributions, I talked in terms of contribution to philosophy, that was last week, social sciences, mathematics, and then we talked about contribution to literature under arts and culture, but then I found some new material on contributions to literature, where there is mention of how William Shakespeare was influenced by Muslims, and a couple of other things which I added in this section. And then conclusion, and in today's session, this was my original idea to talk about the scientific method that was created by Muslims. The scientific method which is even today followed to a significant degree, apart from whatever additions have been done to scientific method by modern science. But you will see that it is largely followed today. The contribution made by Muslim scientists in terms of devising the scientific method, and talk about astronomy, and talk about physics, contribution to physics, and talk about contribution to chemistry. But I think given the special nature of today's session, I will simply talk about scientific method and astronomy, and then save time for the special session. So just the first two parts today, and we will talk about contribution to physics, chemistry, and other sciences in the next class, in the next session. And then contribution to medicine is a huge contribution, surprisingly, is a huge contribution. And that one will be in the very last session, 2 sessions or 2 weeks from today. scientific method. Contribution in terms of that, significant progress in methodology was made, especially in the works of Ibn al-Haytham, whose Latinized name, so that he is not recognized as a Muslim, is Al-Haytham. In the 11th century, he made significant progress in methodology. And he's also known as pioneer of experimental physics. His use of experimentation and quantification to distinguish between competing scientific theories. How do you distinguish between competing scientific theories to find out which one is a valid theory? Is an innovation. He came up with experimentation and quantification to distinguish between competing scientific theories, and that's an innovation in the scientific method. And he's known as the first true scientist of the world. Not very well known in the Western world, but he is the first true scientist. In his book of optics, Ibn al-Haytham, or Haytham, significantly reformed the field of optics and empirically proved that vision occurred because of light rays traveling in straight lines. Straight lines. That was a significant discovery. Reflecting off an object entered into the eyes. He invented the camera obscura to demonstrate the physical nature of light rays. Note the word invented. Invented the camera obscura to demonstrate the physical nature of light rays. His objective was not to discover the camera, modern day camera, but his discovery of the camera obscura led to the invention of the modern day camera in due course of time, but there is no recognition of that by anyone. By anyone. Spotlight. Okay, now you can see, I don't know if you can understand what's shown on this slide. On the right side, you have a scenery in sunlight of two trees and some structure and a human being sitting on the base of the structure. And then you can see in front, that means in front of the person, a wall. And there's a hole in the wall around here where I have my red cursor. Through the hole, the sunlight is entering into a wall. And this is a dark room, by the way. And there's a screen in the dark room. And the image on the right would enter in the form of rays of light through the pinhole in the wall and project onto the wall. And this is actually a picture that was drawn much later, possibly 800 years after Al-Haytham did this sort of experimentation. But that is what camera obscura is, which was invented by Al-Haytham. And that illustration of the camera obscura principle is from James Iscuff's a short account of the eye and nature of vision. And that's the work that he did, Al-Haytham. And this illustration is from 1755. And the pinhole and the idea of camera obscura that Al-Haytham came up with played an important role in the evolution of the modern camera. This is another illustration of camera obscura and the type of experimentation that Al-Haytham did. Al-Haytham's, Al-Haytham, by the way, some of these people, or many of these giants, Muslim giants, they were known as polymaths, meaning they had contribution in vastly different fields, and tremendous contribution, by the way. So, Ibn al-Haytham's Latin translations of his writings on optics were very influential in Europe from about 1200 onward. So this part is continuation of what we discussed, that Europe came to know about his work. Among those he inspired were, and I have only included names that you would recognize, Leonardo da Vinci, René Descartes, and Johannes Kepler. You should have read about his name somewhere. So he inspired them, plus many others. His pioneering work on psychology of, he's in psychology also, psychology of visual perception is considered a precursor to the psychophysics and experimental psychology. Avicenna made rules for testing, and he was in the 10th and 11th century, made rules for testing the effectiveness of drugs, including that the effect produced by the experimental drug should be seen constantly, or that after many repetitions to be valid. And that approach is still practiced today. The physician Rhazes, both are physicians, Avicenna and Rhazes, in the 9th and 10th centuries, was an early proponent of experimental medicine and recommended using control for clinical research. Now, if you have not heard about their names, and I call them Avicenna and Rhazes, you would possibly recognize them as non-Muslim scholars. Both were physicians, but Avicenna is the famous Ibn Sina that you know about, and Rhazes is Al-Razi, whose name has been Latinized as Rhazes, and Ibn Sina as Avicenna. I don't think I mentioned about Rhazes in the previous sessions, but I mentioned about Avicenna. So I wonder if it is deliberate, but there is an attempt, it seems, to hide the real identity of these scholars who have contributed to, I mean, their contribution is tremendous in bringing about the modern world. This is Al-Razi saying, if you want to study the effect of bloodletting on a subject or condition or a patient, divide the patients into two groups, perform bloodletting only on one group and not on the other group. So that one is a control group. Watch both and compare the results. And that's what they do. Contribution to astronomy. Great strides were taken in astronomy by Muslim astronomers. And the key factors are the Islamic world was close to the Greeks, and the Greeks made some advancement in astronomy. And so the Muslims that translated the work done by Greeks, written by Greeks, and they learned from that. And then they advanced to make their own contribution to astronomy. So that is the first reason, the closeness to the Greeks, and then the translation work, and then imbibing knowledge about the cosmos, about the universe from the Greeks, and making advancement, tremendous advancement on that. The second key factor is the religious observances of the Muslims, which required them to pray at exact times during the day. So timekeeping was an important factor. So that put the focus of Muslim scholars on the work of Greeks, and then to question their work and to correct their work and to make advancement on their work. And the third reason I would add is, this is what this is my conjecture, that the third reason as to why the Muslims made such tremendous advancement in astronomy is verses in the Quran, like in Surah Mulk, الذي خلق سبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فتور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. In Surah Mulk verses 3 and 4, Allah Ta'ala says, and the near meaning is, He is the one, Allah is the one who created 7 heavens, one above the other. You will never see any imperfection in the creation of the most compassionate. So what Allah Ta'ala is saying, in other words, is you see His creation. You see His creation and try to find imperfection. And you look again and again, and you will not find any imperfections, any flaws in His creation. Then look again and again. Your sight will return frustrated and weary. That is verse number 4. Or verse like, Allazina yaskuruna Allah qiyaman wa qu'udan wa ala junubihim wa tafakkaruna fi khalqi samawati wal ard. Tafakkur. Allah Ta'ala is saying that reflect on the creation of Allah. Surah Al-Imran, verse 190 and verse 191. Allah Ta'ala is saying, the near meaning is, وَلَا جُنُوبٍ وَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. The near meaning is, indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alteration of the day and night, there are signs for people of reason. The creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alteration of day and night, there are signs for people of reason. And people of reason, they studied the heavenly bodies and the planets, and there was tremendous stride in astronomy. In the next verse, verse 191, the near meaning is, they are those, what type of people are they who reflect on the creation of Allah? They are those who remember Allah while standing, sitting, and lying on their sides. In other words, they remember Allah all the time and reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. And the verse continues thereafter. So the Quran is also responsible for invoking Muslims, for motivating Muslims to study the creation of Allah in terms of the heavenly bodies, the outer space. The astrolabe was a Greek invention which greatly aided Arabic astronomy. It is a handheld 2-dimensional model of the sky which can solve problems of spherical astronomy. Use of the astrolabe is best expressed in Al-Farghani's treatise work on the astrolabe, in which he applied the instrument mathematically to astrology, to astronomy, and timekeeping. So they got it from the Greeks and they made advancement on its use. And this is a picture of astrolabe with inscription from the Holy Quran, and it is from Iran, around 1000 year of the Hijri. or 1650-51 AD, so about 800 years old. The earliest known astrolabe in existence today from the Islamic period was made by Nastulas in around 1000 AD, 927-28 in the 10th century, and is now a treasure of the Kuwait National Museum. Why did I put it in yellow? To remind myself to mention that, they have put the instrument in the museum, but they forgot to, in more recent centuries, actually, they forgot to make use of the instrument. It's in the museum, so you go and see it. And you conveniently forget that Muslims made such tremendous strides in not only in astronomy, but in so many other fields. So it has become a museum piece rather than motivating the Muslims to continue the march in the field of knowledge and in various disciplines and be ahead of everyone as they were some centuries ago. So if they were ahead of everyone else and everyone learned from them, why should they stop? Knowledge has been made obligatory. And any knowledge and all these knowledges, all these disciplines, the creation of the physical world or the chemical world or biology or botany or zoology, the animals and the birds, ornithology, and the plants and trees are all, and the heavenly bodies are all creation of Allah Ta'ala. So the study of all of these should take us closer to Allah Ta'ala. And any knowledge that takes us closer to Allah Ta'ala is beneficial knowledge. It's just that the creator has been taken out from his creation, and people study these different disciplines without being able to recognize the creator behind these creations, and also the creator of these different fields. He's the creator of these different fields also, and we don't recognize him. So like the Quran has become an object to be wrapped up inside beautiful clothing and put on top of the shelf, not to be studied and not to be understood. These different instruments used by the Muslims to advance knowledge in different fields are in museums. In the 13th century, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi constructed the Maragha Observatory in what is today Iran. Advances in astronomy by the Maragha school and their predecessors and successors previous to them and after them include the construction of the first observatory in Baghdad during the reign of Khalifa al-Mamun. Actually, at the time of Khalifa al-Mamun, he himself was an astronomer. And a crater in the moon is named after him. He's not named as Mamun, but Menon, for his contribution to astronomy. Personal contribution, not just giving money. So the very first observatory was constructed in Baghdad, and the collection and correction of previous astronomical data, resolving significant problems in the Ptolemaic model, the development of universal astrolabes, the invention of numerous other astronomical instruments, the beginning of astrophysics. Very surprising. Astrophysics, I thought, is a modern discipline. The beginning of astrophysics and celestial mechanics after Jafar Muhammad ibn Musa ibn Shakir made a significant discovery that the heavenly bodies and celestial spheres were subject to the same physical laws as the earth is. The first elaborate experiments related to astronomical phenomena, the use of exacting empirical observations and experimental techniques, the discovery of by Ibn al-Haytham Hazen that the celestial spheres are not solid. It means the sun, the stars are not solid, but gaseous, and that outer space is less dense than the air. As you go up the atmosphere, you'll find less density in the air. The separation by Ibn al-Haytham of astronomy from natural philosophy. Previously, it was part of natural philosophy. And Ibn al-Shatir also had contribution. The first known Ptolemaic models by Ibn al-Haytham and Muwayyad al-Din al-Urdi. And what is the Ptolemaic model? It is that the planets and the sun, including the sun, moves around the earth. And that came from Ptolemy the Greek. The non-Ptolemaic model, and the Ptolemaic model was rejected, and then came the non-Ptolemaic model. The rejection of the Ptolemaic model on empirical rather than philosophical grounds. So it was rejected on empirical grounds based on repeated observations and rather than on philosophical grounds by Ibn al-Shatir. The first empirical observational evidence of the Earth's rotation by Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, that the Earth rotates every 24 hours, it completes its rotation. By Nasir al-Din al-Tusi and Ali Khushji, and al-Birjandi's early hypotheses on circular inertia. And what is inertia? It is related to the mass of a body. You know, some of these terms we won't understand, and I don't intend to go into the meaning of these terms because then we will not be able to advance. But we should get what the intention is to impress you about the fascinating and mammoth contribution that the Muslims made in various disciplines. Several Muslim astronomers also considered the possibility of the Earth's rotation on its axis and perhaps a heliocentric solar system. That is the non-Ptolemaic model. That means the heliocentric solar system is what we understand today, that all the planets revolve around the sun. One of the major advances in Islamic astronomy was the rejection of the Ptolemaic system of the planets that placed the sun, moon, and other planets in orbit around the Earth. So on the left is the Ptolemaic model, Earth-centered solar system. On the right is the system that we know it to be, the sun-centered solar system. And that was one of the major contributions of the Muslims. One of the first to criticize this model was Ibn al-Haytham, the same person, a leader of physics in the 11th century in Cairo. It is known that the Nicholas Copernicus is known as the father of the present day astronomy. But see how he learned from the Arabs, the Muslims. It is known that the Copernican heliocentric model employed geometrical constructions that had been developed previously by the Maraga school. His arguments for the Earth's rotation were similar to those of Nasir al-Din Tusi and Ali Khushji. In about 964 AD, the Persian astronomer Abdul Rahman al-Sufi, writing in his book of fixed stars, described a nebulous spot in the Andromeda constellation, the first definitive reference to what is now known to be the Andromeda galaxy. Our galaxy is the Milky Way, and the Andromeda galaxy is the nearest neighbor to our galaxy. Our galaxy is a spiral galaxy. That is, it moves around a center. All the billions and billions of stars in our galaxy, anywhere from 50 billion to 200 billion stars in our galaxy. So they move around a center. The Andromeda galaxy is a similar galaxy, a spiral galaxy. And this is our galaxy, a representation of our galaxy from NASA, the Milky Way, the spiral galaxy. And this is the Andromeda, the galaxy, spiral galaxy, and the nearest to us. But how near it is? If you travel at the speed of light, it will take you 2.5 million, 2.54 million light years. If you live for 2.54 million years and travel at the speed of light, you will reach that galaxy. These are astronomical numbers. And that's why this field is known as astronomy. The names of, and this is the last slide. The names of some of the stars used, including Betelgeuse, Rigel, Vega, Aldebaran, and Fomalhaut, are several of the names of stars that come directly from Arabic origins. Next comes contribution in physics, and we won't have time for that. So next Sunday, chemistry and other fields. So we basically talked about scientific method and astronomy in session 4 on contributions. Conclusion, what was the extent of contribution of Muslims? If you pose that question, and in one simple word, it would be mammoth. Muslim scholars learned from the Greeks and other cultures. They added vastly. And by the way, this is my conjecture. You don't have to accept it. Just to give an idea about what I think about the Muslim contribution compared to what was known at that point when the Muslims started their renaissance. So what was known at that, when they started, compared to that, if their contribution was by a factor of 100, then whatever the Muslims came up with and Europe learned from that, their contribution possibly was over the contribution of the Muslims was possibly about 50. But don't take these numbers literally. And how much are we covering in terms of contribution in a discipline, in each discipline? How much are we covering? A tiny, tiny fraction. We don't have, number one, we don't have time. And number two, there are so many other aspects to cover in our journey of acquiring beneficial knowledge. The point I made last week is this. What is this? وَعَدَ اللَّهَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَا يَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Allah Ta'ala says, and the near meaning is, Allah has promised to those of you who believe and do good deeds that He will most certainly, note the word, make them rulers in the earth as He made rulers those before them. The Muslims, and I wish I could show you, I forgot. I could show you the map of the extent of the Muslim empire. But so that you understand, those who are joining new, so that you can understand, at the height of the Abbasid dynasty, was it the Abbasid? No, the Umayyad dynasty, 750 AD. The Muslim empire extended from the east to the west, from Portugal and Spain to Sindh in present-day Pakistan. 6,000 miles. 6,000 miles from the east to from the north to the south, about 2,000 miles at least, and covered, and I did this calculation myself, covered about 40 present day countries. 40 present day countries. So Allah Ta'ala made them rulers of the world, Khalifatul Ard. And the point I want to make is that Allah Ta'ala also made them dominant, not only in terms of earthly space, territory, but also in terms of knowledge. Made them rulers, dominant in terms of knowledge. Today, neither we are dominant in earthly terms, in terms of territory, all scattered 57 Muslim majority countries, but ruled by so-called Muslim rulers. I don't want to go beyond that point. And absolutely behind in terms of knowledge. Why? Actually, that is one of the basic points I want to make at the end of all these presentations of Muslim dynasties and Muslim rule towards the very end. But let me make the point now that the answer is given in front of you in the verse of the Quran. Allah has promised to those of you who believe and do good deeds that He will most certainly make them rulers in the earth. So what is the condition we have to fulfill? We have to be believers. And you will tell me we are believers. We are believers. If you have few pennies in your pocket, and I ask you the question, do you have money? And you say, yes, I have money. You are not wrong. But those few pennies will not even buy a chocolate for you. What we need is not the level of Iman that we have, but the level of Iman that is required to be able to do good deeds, to be able to follow all the do's of Allah, and to be able to keep away from all the don'ts of Allah Ta'ala. We are not able to do that, plain and simple. We cannot jump into obeying the orders of Allah when it comes in front of us. We have made our own idea about Islam. This is Islam. Kalima, namaz, roza, hajj, zakat, that is Islam. And I'm content with that. But that is your ummi idea, ignorant idea, because you have not devoted time to understanding what Allah wants. What is Islam? You have had all the time in the world, we, including me, had all the time in the world to pursue our dreams, worldly dreams, ambitions, and no time for beneficial knowledge that will benefit us in this world, getting peace and tranquility, and in the eternal world, getting peace, success, and tranquility. And that is what Allah wants from us. Not we want, not we, what we understand to be what Allah wants, but what He actually wants us from us. That is the knowledge we have not pursued. And one great barrier is the regimentation we have had in life. Regimentation. And that came with whatever dreams we had, ambitions we had, we pursued that. So what I mentioned last week, let me again mention, we have some new folks in the audience. Dunya goads us to be an excellent professional. Allah goads us to be an excellent Muslim first, and then pursue dunya. Dunya drives us to transient worldly professions. Transient worldly professions. Allah motivates us to keep eternal earnings uppermost that will go with us, the currency of the hereafter. Shaitan invites towards Jahannam. Allah invites towards Jannah. Our goal is acquisition of dunya, degree, position, wealth, power. The tragedy of insan is in single-minded pursuit of dunya, he acquires what will not go with him and does not have time to acquire the currency, the acquisition that will go with him. He does not have the time to question or brood over the question, why Allah sent us. And you can get the answer by seeking knowledge. Seeking knowledge, it is vast. We may know a tiny part of it, but it is vast. So I urge you, I implore you, I request you, I beseech you to seek knowledge. It is obligatory to seek knowledge such that we can spend 24 hours of our life as per the commandments of Allah and as shown by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Start with the presumption that we are ummi, ignorant. We might be worldly smart, but we are ignorant. So much for today. I invite you to join next week in our journey on this aspect of knowledge, which is contribution of Muslims, so that we are goaded towards, motivated towards seeking knowledge and adding to be in the forefront, the cutting edge of knowledge. So that was the first part. The second part, I'm sorry, I took a little more time than I thought I would, even though I cut down tremendously on what I wanted to cover. The second part is dua. We will, inshallah, pray for our brother Zahidur Rahman Shoji from 13 batch. And may Allah Ta'ala grant him Jannah. Mother of Lieutenant Colonel Rashidul Hassan from 17 batch, who's a regular, very regular participant of this group. And the father of Tawfiq Anwar from 44th batch, Janab Muhammad Anwarul Islam, passed away. And the wife of Farooq Amin, my batchmate, Begum Raunak Amin, passed away. Before dua, I will mention 5 things for everyone as a reminder. The near meaning of 2 hadith is the following. When Allah takes away the near and dear one of someone, and that someone, the abd of Allah, is patient with the decree of Allah and remains pleased with the decree of Allah, সন্তুষ্ট থাকে আল্লাহর হুকুমের উপরে, আল্লাহর নিয়ে যাওয়ার ব্যাপারে. Allah Ta'ala says, I will grant to the abd of mine nothing less than Jannah. Point number 2. If you lost a near and dear one, and all of us have lost some near and dear one, do not think that they have gone and we will stay in this transient world. One day we will also leave. We will all go sooner or later. No one has come to stay. All will have to go sooner or later. The clock is ticking. Can you hear that? When my time comes, none knows. The wise person is the one who often remembers death and continually prepares for life after death. Point number 3. We can do 5 things for our deceased near ones. Number 1, pray for them. And in view of that, they will get provision in the grave, as we need provision in this world and needed provision in the womb of the mother. We also need provision in the grave. And that we take through the good deeds that we perform solely for the sake of Allah. And we also get provisions from the prayers of near and dear ones. So when we pray for them, they get blessings, provision in the grave, with our names uttered before them. So that's the first thing we can do, pray for them. Second thing is we can perform sadaqah jariyah, charity, the benefit of which will continue to give benefit to the needy ones. And in lieu, the deceased for whom we have performed sadaqah jariyah will continue to get benefit. Number 3, fulfill their wasiyah, their unfulfilled intentions, desires, wishes, so that they get the blessing of that. Number 4, pay off their debts, if any. Debt is not forgiven, even for the shaheed. Number 5, take care of folks they used to like, mix with, mingle with. So in one hadith, Sahih hadith, it is said that this has tremendous reward when we take care of the folks that they liked. So pray for them, perform sadaqah jariyah, fulfill their wasiyah, pay off their debts, take care of folks they mixed with. Point number 4 is I am somehow, not in the operational affairs, but in other ways, indirectly associated with an orphanage and madrasa near Kushtia. And I requested them to, for today's dua, requested them to beef up our dua today, to strengthen our dua today, to finish the Quran, recitation of the Quran a few times, and they recited the Quran 8 times. And we will pray for the ones we lost recently, and actually the blessings. Allah Ta'ala is so kind and merciful. The blessings can be conveyed to all our near and dear ones. No money has been paid for this recitation. It is out of love. Point number 5, we will ourselves recite Surah Ikhlas and Surah Fatiha, and we will convey the blessings of that, of that recitation for everybody. I will pray such that Allah Ta'ala conveys the blessings to all. And I said 5 points, but I'll make it 6 points. Allah Ta'ala, has given us time as the most valuable asset, but time flies. Time and tide waits for none. ভাইরা আমার, বোনেরা আমার, আমরা সময় ধরে রাখতে পারি, এই অমূল্য সময় ধরে রাখতে পারি। সময় চলে যাচ্ছে কিন্তু ধরে রাখতে পারি। আর না হলে এই সময় চিরবিদায় নিবে। We'll be held accountable for all the time that we spend without making it useful by remembering Allah and by obeying Allah in the manner shown by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we are expected to lead our 24-hour life in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and make time valuable thereby. That's the way to make time valuable. We see the order of Allah, the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then purity of intention solely for the sake of Allah, with the requisite level of Iman that needs ilm. I'm again emphasizing, needs change of direction from the direction we are on to how Allah wants us to use our time in terms of meeting responsibilities towards Allah, in terms of meeting responsibilities towards fellow human beings. We create all sorts of worldly wants. Our needs are limited, but wants unlimited because of competition. He has, so I have to have. She has, so I have to have. So that after we retire, after 35 years, 40 years of work, we again have to start a new career. And then we end our life without getting time to know what Allah wants from us. There's no end. We have to earn to fulfill our wants that we have created. Like the Frankenstein's monster. It's, Islam is a 24-hour endeavor, not just 5 prayers. And should I tell you, one of the most important commandments of Allah, for which He has made us the best of nations, best of nations. Kuntum khayra ummati ukhrijat linnas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah. You are the best of nations. Selected from mankind. Selected. Why you are the best? You will call people towards the good and stop them from evil doing. That's a 24-hour endeavor. We don't have time for that. We don't understand the importance of that. And we will be held accountable on the Day of Judgment. In at least 60 places in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala mentions this effort of inviting others. 60 places, at least. Request for dua from Kamrul, my batchmate. His wife died recently. We prayed for her. Again, he said, please pray for Naseem. May Allah Ta'ala grant her Jannatul Firdaus. Request for dua from Sayyidu Zaman Shuja for Muhammad Maruf Ahmed of 11th batch, who suffered brain hemorrhage. He is admitted in the Neuroscience Institute for some days now. May Allah Ta'ala grant him complete recovery. Request for dua from Tanim Hassan, my batchmate. May Allah Ta'ala remove his difficulties. And Amir Hossein, he is here. He has had cancer that spread through his body 7 years ago, but Allah Ta'ala has given him life until now. Mrs. Lutfi Ayub, may Allah Ta'ala grant her complete cure. SM Ilyas, patient paralyzed, may Allah Ta'ala grant him recovery. Barkat, 6th batch, had cancer. May Allah Ta'ala grant him recovery. Panna, undergoing dialysis. May Allah Ta'ala grant him recovery. Mrs. Mahfuz Reza from 6th batch underwent cancer. Muhammad Habibur Rahman, another patient who needs our dua. Another brother who needs our dua. May Allah Ta'ala grant him complete cure from all his continued afflictions. Lieutenant Colonel Abdul Rauf, may Allah Ta'ala grant him cure. Major Salim Ershad Shena, undergoing cancer treatment. Dr. Saif's father-in-law undergoing is a cancer patient. May Allah Ta'ala grant him a recovery. Amirul Faisal, suffering from the effect of stroke for at least 6 years, 7 years now. Mrs. Aftab, 14 batch, cancer patient. May Allah Ta'ala grant her cure. Abir's father, a dialysis patient. May Allah Ta'ala grant him cure. Naimur Rahman from 46 batch, neurological disorder. May Allah Ta'ala grant him recovery. Wife of an Orca brother who has cancer. I cannot tell the name. I don't have the permission, but we can obviously pray for her. She's undergoing treatment. And then there are others. Allah Ta'ala knows them. And our not mentioning their names does not make any difference to Allah Ta'ala. We will pray accordingly. So I request you to recite Surah Fatiha once and then Surah Ikhlas 3 times. Reciting Surah Ikhlas 3 times is like finishing the Quran once. And reciting Surah Fatiha once is like equivalent to 2/3 of the Quran. 2/3 of the Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Before I continue with this second session, which is dua, let me also mention, so that some of you do not drop out, that after the dua, we will remember, we'll have few words to say on 3 of the deceased ones. And the 4th one, Shoji, his friends are here. There are others from other batches who would like to remember him. So please stay for that 3rd session, which is remembrances, reminiscences. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, jazallahu anna Muhammadan sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ma huwa ahluhu. لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم سبحان الله رب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك وغنيمة من كل بر وسلامة من كل إثم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا مجاهدا إلا نصرته ولا مظلوما إلا نصرته ولا مسلما إلا رحمته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين وإلهكم إله واحد لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا مالك الملك يا عزيز الجبار المتكبر يا خالق الباري المصور أنت ولي في الدنيا والآخرة يا فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت ولي في الدنيا والآخرة ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما اللهم اغفر لي ولوالدنا وجميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك مجيب الدعوات برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم أسألك من خير ما سألك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك منه نبيك محمد sallallahu alaihi wasallam, antal musta'an wa alaykal balag wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. O Allah, please, we beseech you to grant us what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for. And we beseech you, please grant us protection from what he sought protection from. O Allah, you have been most kind and most merciful and most gracious and most magnificent and most munificent in giving us the tawfiq to gather together for this session of beneficial knowledge, and grant us tawfiq until we die, so that we can understand our responsibilities towards you, and we can understand our responsibilities towards fellow human beings, and we can understand your do's, and we can know about your do's and don'ts, and we can know about the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we can perform what you want us to perform, seeking your pleasure and only your pleasure, with love in our heart for you and love in our heart for your Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh Allah, you accept us, Allah. We beseech you to forgive all our sins, Allah, that we committed knowingly and unknowingly, so many times knowingly, that we committed openly or secretly, so many times openly, that we committed, which are major or minor. So many of them are major sins. We may not know about them, but we are committing major sins, and openly. Allah grant us the knowledge to understand why you created us and how we can fulfill the purpose for which you created us. We are ummi, we are ignorant. We know so many things, but we did not have the requisite time to know about what you want from us in our life, Allah. The valuable asset that you have given us, we have wasted that asset, and many of us have reached a point in our life that, at least I feel, one of my feet is in the grave, and I have not been able to know you or know fully well what you want from us, your do's and don'ts. And I'm on my way, about to exit this world with ignorance, surrounded by ignorance, rather than by the light of knowledge. Grant us the tawfiq, Allah. Accept us, Allah. Accept us underneath the shade of your rahmah, underneath the shade of your maghfirah, underneath the shade of your hidayat, underneath the shade of your hifazat, Allah, and grant us, our future generations, the same shade, and grant to all Muslims the same shade, and grant to their future generation to come until the day of judgment the same shade, and guide all non-Muslims so that all of them are saved from the fire of Jahannam and can enter paradise. O Allah, you protect us from shaitan and his whisperings, from our evil-based desires and its whisperings, and from the whisperings of evil people who seek to derail us, and the fatal attraction of dunya. O Allah, you protect us, Allah. O Allah, you accept us, Allah. And do not leave us for a single moment, or the wink of an eye, to ourselves without your protection. Hold our hand and take us through the journey of life, so that we can gain your pleasure. Do not take us from this world before we gain your pleasure, before we can live in your pleasure and die in your pleasure. And when we die, save us from the torment of death, and the torment of the grave, and the torment of the day of judgment, and the torment of Jahannam. Enable us to utter the kalima when we die, and enable us to foil the last attempt of shaitan to derail us before we die. And what we have been able to recite today, and what we have been able to gain in terms of the beneficial knowledge and the blessings thereof, and what we have been able to perform in terms of good deeds ourselves, and the recitation of the Holy Quran 8 times, Allah, accept all of them, Allah. Accept our deeds and the deeds of others, and convey the blessings to those for whom we have gathered today, to Zahidur Rahman Shoji, to the mother of Lieutenant Colonel Rashid Al Hassan, to Janab Muhammad Anwar al Islam, the father of Tawfiq, to Begum Raunak Amin, wife of Farooq Amin, to our parents who are in your care in the grave, to our in-laws in the grave, to our grandparents in the grave, to our uncles and aunts in the grave, to our friends in the grave, to our teachers in the grave, to our staff in the grave, to our administrators in the grave, to all our near and dear ones in the grave, to all Muslims in the grave. You are most gracious and most merciful. There'll be no reduction in the benefit you convey to any one of them. Allah, you forgive their punishment in the grave, Allah. You grant them salvation, eternal salvation. Forgive their punishment in the grave, expand their grave, make their graves, fill their graves with nur, make their graves a garden of Jannatul Firdaus, and increase their status every day in the grave. And when we enter our grave, grant us your best treatment, Allah. Grant us your best treatment, Allah. And when we are raised on the day of judgment with our near and dear ones on that tormentous, tumultuous day, Allah, where there is no shade except the shade of your arsh, grant us a space underneath your shade, the shade of the arsh, and make our hisab easy, Allah. Make our hisab easy, O Allah, and grant us our book of deeds in the right hand. And when we cross the bridge with our near and dear ones, enable us to cross the bridge in the wink of an eye. And when it is time to enter Jannah or Jahannam, enable us to enter as your Habib Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam provoked us to ask for. Enable us to enter Jannatul Firdaus, Allah, so that we can be underneath the shade of your mercy, of your highest mercy, forever and forever, and in the nearness of your Habib Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. O Allah, you accept what is in our heart that will benefit us in this dunya, and what will not benefit us in this dunya, grant us in the hereafter. O Allah, you accept our neck hajat. O Allah, you remove the difficulties that we are facing of any sort, any type. O Allah, remove the needs of the people who are suffering from basic needs, Allah, and protect the people of Morocco who underwent the earthquake, and those who died, grant them the status of a shaheed, Allah. Oh Allah, you can remove the difficulties of all the people in different nook and corner of the world suffering from different types of problems and wants, different types of needs, Allah. Oh Allah, and who are undergoing torture and oppression and suppression in different ways. Remove their difficulties also, Allah. O Allah, we beseech you to accept what is in our heart, to remove our difficulties, to remove our illnesses, and those whose difficulties and illnesses are bothering us, remove their difficulties and illnesses also, Allah. O Allah, accept us, Allah. O Allah, I cannot ask equal to your might and majesty. Grant us equal to your might and majesty. I cannot seek protection equal to your magnificence and munificence. Grant us protection equal to your magnificence and munificence. Allahumma innaka afuwun kareemun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaytana wa hab lana min ladunka rahmatan innaka antal wahhab. Ya Qaziul Hajat, Ya Rafi'ad Darajat, Ya Halal al-Mushkilat, Ya Mujibud Da'awat, bi rahmatika nastaghith. Ya Awwal al-Awwalin, Ya Akhir al-Akhirin, Ya Akram al-Akramin, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Rahim al-Masakin, Ya Zil Quwwat al-Matin. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وحمد لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم آمين يا رب العالمين.